Part 26. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiaorong. Chapter 252. Emperor Chen was about to draft an edict. After thinking for a while, he turned to look at Wei Jian and said, "It's not a big deal. There is no need to issue another edict. Wei Jian, please accompany him to the Tang mansion in person and pass on my instructions to Tang Ning and Tang Ning. No one can stop the second young lady from meeting each other." Wei Jian bowed slightly. "I obey the order." Regardless of whether it is an imperial edict or an oral instruction, as long as it can achieve the goal, Tang Ning clasped his fists and bowed, saying, "I thank your majesty for your kindness. This matter is your family matter. It's hard for me to get involved. I can only help you to this extent." Huang Chen looked at him and said, "Okay, I haven't seen your mother in 18 years. I must be very anxious, so go quickly. I excuse myself." Although it is not as big a battle as an imperial edict, the oral edict is also the emperor's oral edict, and the pomp and pomp should be indispensable. Tang Ning and Eunuch Wei were in a sedan, with guards in front of the sedan leading the way, and eunuchs following behind the sedan. After leaving the palace gate, they headed straight towards the Tang mansion. In front of the Tang mansion, it was much busier than in the past. There was an endless stream of pedestrians. If you observe carefully, you will find that many people passed by the Tang mansion several times, seemingly waiting for something. The location of the Tang mansion is not in a busy city. In fact, the people living in this area are all powerful officials in the capital, and the environment is relatively quiet. It's just that in recent days, the number one scholar has been visiting Tang mansion every day, which has aroused the curiosity of many people in Beijing. In the book, there is an Agarwood who saves his mother, and in reality, there is also a scholar who saves his mother. Both are full of hardships, and when everyone compares them, they have a different feeling in their hearts. I heard that the number one scholar was sitting on the bench every day in the Tang mansion. Although the Tang mansion let him in every time, no one was willing to see him, and they would not even give him a cup of tea. The people who heard about this were curious and wanted to see it with their own eyes. The number one scholar is really pitiful. He and his mother live in the same house, but they can't see each other. The Tang family is so cruel. Why isn't the number one scholar here today? Could it be that he has given up? Everyone gathered together, and while talking in low voices, they did not forget to spit in the direction of the Tang family. The concierge of the Tang mansion came over and said loudly, "What are you doing? Go farther away. What about you? I saw you walking around here 8 times in the morning. If you don't leave, I'll have your legs broken." The expression on his face was a little depressed. The Tang family was a big family. Even if he was just a small concierge, his face would be bright when he went out. But recently, those guys who usually flattered him didn't even look at him. It seemed that he was a very shameful thing as the Tang family's concierge. He certainly knew the reason for the change in attitude of those people, but it was not him who did not allow the number one scholar to see his mother. He was just a concierge of the Tang family. He couldn't express the pain in his heart, so he could only sigh secretly and continue to drive away the spectators gathered at Tang's house. "What are you?" Another group of people came over from the front. He just raised his hand. After seeing clearly, he swallowed the next words. The people who came were all wearing armor and carrying swords, and there was a fierce aura coming from a distance. It seemed that they were not something that a small concierge like him could afford to offend. The crowd watching not far away was even more uproar. "Dear me, aren't these the palace guards? What are they doing in the Tang family? Look, the champion got off the sedan. Could it be that he is here to pick up Miss Tang's family? The champion is going to save his mother." The expressions on everyone's faces were both puzzled and surprised. Looking at this from a distance, Tang Ning and Eunuch Wei got off the sedan. Wei Jian looked at him with a smile and said, "Master Tang, please. Tang Ning also smiled and said, Eunuch Wei, please go first. The concierge of Tang Mansion stepped forward and said in a trembling voice, two of you. Wei Jian looked at him and said, His Majesty's decree is passed on, who is in charge of the Tang Mansion now? Let him come out quickly. Please come in. The concierge first invited the two people in, then glanced at a servant standing at the door and said, Why don't you hurry up and report? What's different about a royal tiger skin? Tang Ning came to the Tang family 4 times and never saw the owner. This time, as soon as she walked into the Tang family, she saw a middle-aged man walking out quickly. Tang Qi stepped forward quickly, looked at Wei Jian, and said hurriedly, Eunuch Wei is here to visit. Tang Qi sometimes fails to welcome him from afar, and sometimes fails to welcome him from afar. As for Tang Ning, who was standing aside, he selectively ignored her. When the group of people walked to the main hall, Tang Keke looked at Wei Jian and asked carefully, I wonder if Eunuch Wei is here. What's the important matter? Wei Jian smiled and said, According to your Majesty's instructions, the number 1 scholar misses his mother very much. Your Majesty has specially ordered me to bring him to the Tang family to meet the second young lady of your mansion. No one is allowed to stop him. Mr. Tang, please hurry up and invite the second young lady come out. Tang Qi looked at Tang Ning and quickly looked away. When Wei Jian arrived in person, he made it clear that there was something going on. If His Majesty ordered him to take his second sister out, he had doubts in his heart. But since they only met once, he must have asked for His Majesty's order. He pondered for a moment, then a smile appeared on his face. He looked at a servant behind him and said, Go and ask the second young lady to come out. From the beginning to the end, he only glanced at Tang Ning. Yes, the servant responded and hurried out. In a small courtyard somewhere in the Tang mansion, Tang Shui walked out and saw a servant hurriedly leaving the courtyard next door. He was startled and asked, What are you doing? The servant immediately said, Miss, someone is coming from the palace. The master asked me to ask the second young lady to go out. Someone from the palace, Tang Shui frowned and asked, Why are they here? He came with Tang Ning. The servant looked at her and said, It is said that His Majesty has issued an order to let Tang Ning meet the second lady. His Majesty has issued an order. Tang Shui showed a hint of joy on her face, and followed the servant into the yard, saying, Little ant, come out quickly. There was no figure in the yard, and no response from the house. Tang Shui walked quickly into the room. Little ant. There was no figure in the room. She stood there in a daze, and ran back to the yard again. The yard was not big, and it could be said that everything was in sight. After confirming it again and again, she sat on a stone bench in the yard. She was a little overwhelmed for a moment, and murmured, My aunt is missing. The servant was so scared that his face turned pale. After searching every corner inside and outside the house, he trembled and said, What should I do? In the lobby, Tang Ning sat on a chair, looking out the door. Wei Jian drank a cup of tea, looked at Tang Qi again, and asked, Master Tang, does the second lady live far away? Why did she take so long? Tang Qi was also confused, stood up, and said, I'll go and see. As soon as he walked out of the door, a servant ran over in a panic and said, Master, it's not good. When Tang Qi saw him, he inexplicably had a bad premonition in his heart, and asked in a deep voice, Why are you panicking? Where is the second young lady? The servant trembled and said, Second young lady is missing. What? Tang Qi's face changed drastically. How could she be missing? Tang Ning sat in the hall, picked up the teacup and put it down again, looked at Wei Jian, and asked, Eunuch Wei, do you think they will not let my mother come out? Wei Jian smiled and said, Don't worry, Mr. Zhuangyuan, there is no difference between the emperor's oral order and the imperial edict. If you don't respect the imperial edict, you will disobey the order. Mr. Tang is a smart man and will not do irrational things. Tang Ning nodded and said, then I am relieved. Wei Jian drank another cup of tea, and then he wondered, strange, it's been 2 cups of tea, even if it's slow, it should have arrived. He stood up and saw Tang Chi, with a gloomy face, walking in from outside. He looked at Tang Chi and asked, Master Tang, what happened? Tang Chi looked at Wei Jian, moved his lips, and whispered after a long time, Eunuch Wei, to be honest, my sister is missing. Wei Jian was startled at first, then smiled again and said, Master Tang, this joke is not funny at all. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 253. Tang Chi's face turned pale and said, Eunuch Wei, Tang is not joking, she is just her roommate, she is really missing. Wei Jian still had a kind smile on his face and said, Master Tang, you can search again. After half an hour, I will return to the palace to reply. 3-inch world. This was an ultimatum. After Tang Chi pondered for a moment, he nodded, strode out, and said in a deep voice, look, even if it means digging 3 inches into the Tang mansion, we must find the second lady. He looked sharply at a maid and asked, have you seen the second young lady before? The maid couldn't help but tremble and said, good morning, when I delivered the meal, I didn't see the second lady. I thought she hadn't gotten up yet. Tang Chi's face became even more ugly and asked, what happened last night? Last night, I personally watched the second young lady fall asleep. Tang Chi clenched his fists. There were many guards in the Tang mansion and they were heavily guarded. It was impossible for a weak woman to escape from the Tang mansion silently. He glanced below and said, gather everyone together and look for her. In the hall, Wei Jian looked at Tang Ning with an embarrassed look on his face, and said, don't worry, number 1 scholar. Maybe your daughter has gone somewhere. Let's wait and have a cup of tea first. Tang Ning shook her head and said, I'm afraid the tea is poisonous. Wei Jian smiled and said, how is this possible? It's not poisonous, but there may be saliva or something. The smile on Wei Jian's face froze, he looked at the teacup in his hand and slowly put it down. Considering the entanglement between the number 1 scholar and the Tang family, it didn't seem impossible for this to happen, and he had just drank a lot of tea, and when he thought about it, he felt his stomach churn. Within half an hour, the Tang mansion servants searched each room, not sparing any corner, and the entire Tang mansion was in a state of chaos. Tang Chi walked in from the outside, looked at Wei Jian, and said with difficulty, Eunuch Wei, we have searched all over the Tang mansion, but we still haven't found the second sister. Wei Jian stood up, looked at him deeply, and said, in that case, I will return to the palace to reply to His Majesty. He looked at Tang Ning and said with a smile, number 1 scholar, let's go. Tang Chi stood there in a daze, watching Wei Jian and Tang Ning walk out of the Tang mansion, and immediately said to a servant, go to the Ministry of Rites quickly and invite the eldest master back. Although the second sister is indeed missing, she disappeared earlier than later, and she disappeared just when His Majesty gave the order. How can the Tang family explain to His Majesty? Even he himself didn't believe that such a coincidence could happen. If this matter is not handled well, it will be the crime of deceiving the emperor. Even the Tang family cannot bear this responsibility. At this moment, he had no other thoughts in his mind. After giving instructions to a servant, he looked at another maid and said, go to Prince Duan's mansion and let Prince Duan find a way to spread the news to concubine Hui. There was panic in the Tang mansion, and outside the Tang mansion, the people who came after hearing the news had already surrounded the streets. How is the situation inside? I seem to have seen the chamberlain in the palace just now. Could it be that His Majesty has issued an order for the number 1 scholar to take his mother out? If this is really the case, Your Majesty is too wise. It's been so long, it's time to come out. The crowd looked in the direction of the Tang Mansion gate, and while they were talking about it, there was finally movement at the door. The number 1 scholar is out. Hey, why didn't you see that Miss Tang Mansion? No, the champion's face is very ugly. How dare the Tang family resist the decree? What just happened inside? Tang Ning bowed her hands to Wei Jian and said, Eunuch Wei, please worry that your trip was in vain. It's no trouble to do things according to the order. Wei Jian smiled and said, I have to go back to the palace to reply to the order, and I won't send the champion. Eunuch Wei, walk slowly. After seeing Wei Jian off, Tang Ning glanced in the direction of Tang Mansion again, turned around and left. In the crowd, someone finally had the courage to step forward and asked, Master Zhuang Yuan, have you seen your daughter-in-law? Tang Ning shook her head and strode away. The news spread among the crowd in a very short period of time. The way everyone looked at Tang Mansion changed again. The Tang family is so audacious. You even dare to disobey His Majesty's words. Is the Tang family going to rebel? You are disrespectful by resisting the decree. I wonder what your Majesty will do with the Tang family. Snapped. In a certain hall of the palace, Emperor Chen slapped the table. What did you say? You lost me. Wei Jian hurriedly bowed and said, Your Majesty, this is what the Tang family said. Emperor Chen's face darkened and he said, in our 18 years in the Tang family, people have been thrown away sooner or later, but now they are thrown away. Where can a living person be thrown away? After he finished speaking, he stood up, put one hand on the table, and said, I just want the mother and son to meet each other. Wei Jian, what do you mean by the Tang family? Do they really have the intention to rebel? Wei Jian lowered his head and said, Your Majesty, this matter has not been clarified yet, I dare not speak nonsense. After Chen Huan calmed down, he sat down again and murmured, the Tang family has no reason to rebel, nor the courage to rebel. I don't think they dare to resist the decree, but where has this person gone? He looked at a certain location in the palace and asked, Ling Yun, how difficult is it to take someone out of the Tang family quietly? Ling Yun took a step forward, thought for a moment, and said, Your Majesty, with the guards of the Tang family, if I am alone, I cannot guarantee that I will not be discovered when I sneak into the Tang family. Even if I am a palace attendant, it is impossible to bring a living person out quietly. Emperor Chen frowned, so, the Tang family really hid the person. As soon as he finished speaking, an eunuch came forward and bowed, saying, Your Majesty, concubine Hui wants to see you. They said I was busy. Emperor Chen said impatiently, waved his hand, and said, Forget it, let her in. Not long after, a woman in palace clothes walked into the hall quickly and said, Your Majesty, you have to make a decision for me and the Tang family. Emperor Chen glanced at her and asked, What decision? The woman in palace clothes said, My sister was abducted by thieves and disappeared. Your Majesty must send someone to catch the thieves. Whether she was abducted or for some other reason, I will have someone investigate it thoroughly. Emperor Chen glanced at her and said, It's your Tang family that has been doing things in recent days, which has caused public outrage. Even I can't stand it. The Tang family is a big family after all. Do you really have no face at all? The palace-dressed woman's face changed, and she hurriedly said, Your Majesty, the Tang family was slandered by rumors. Whether it is a rumor or a false accusation, the people know it, and I know it too. Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, I will find out about this matter. You can wait for the news in the palace. After a while, the palace-dressed woman walked out of the hall, walked to the door of another hall, and lowered her voice and said, Let Minister Tang come to see me. Although the people in front of the Tang family's door had dispersed, the news spread to the entire capital. Those with complicated relationships got accurate news through the servants of the Tang family. The top scholar went to the Tang family 4 times, but not only did he not see his biological mother, but no one in the Tang family was willing to see him. The top scholar, who missed his mother, went to the palace to ask for an audience with the emperor. He finally got an imperial decree to allow mother and son to meet. As a result, when he arrived at the Tang family, he was told that his mother was missing. The Tang family must have hidden her. This is deceiving the emperor. You are so brave that you don't even care about the imperial decree. I surrender. The Tang family is doomed. Tang Ning was about to go home, and Tang Shui was still following him. Tang Ning turned around and looked at her, and asked, "Why are you following me?" Tang Shui looked at him with her arms around her chest and asked, "Aren't you worried at all that my aunt is missing?" Tang Ning was stunned, and suddenly covered his chest and gritted his teeth and said, "No matter what they do to her, I will not let this matter go." Tang Shui looked at him and asked, "Has anyone ever told you that your acting is bad?" You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 254. Every festival such as Chinese Valentine's Day, Mid-Autumn Festival, New Year's Eve, and Shangyuan Festival, the imperial court would allow various departments to take 1 to 3 days off. However, local county offices, including Ping'an County Office and Jingzhou Office, such festivals are the busiest times. On ordinary days, there is a curfew in the capital. Ordinary people don't even dare to go out at night. If they are caught, the lightest punishment is a cane. Those who commit crimes and have evil intentions don't dare to go out to cause trouble. This makes it very easy for the government to maintain public security. But these festivals are different. The imperial court has cancelled the curfew. It is rare for the people to have an exciting nightlife. No matter what they have to do, they go out of their homes one after another. At this time, the streets and alleys of the capital and the cruise boats will be packed to the rafters. Bustling often means chaos. It is undeniable that most people go to the streets to have fun, but some people with evil intentions also find opportunities on days like this. Every important holiday, there are at least dozens of people in the capital reporting to the yamen for being stolen or robbed, and some major cases also happen from time to time. A year ago during the Lantern Festival, Tang Jing, the eldest son of the Tang family, was brutally murdered on Lantern Festival. The murderer has not been found yet. A year later, on New Year's Eve, King Kong was assassinated on his way back from the palace. His life was in danger. Emperor Chen very angry. During the Chinese New Year, Ping'an County Government, Jingzhou Government Office, Dali Temple, Ministry of Punishment, Yashitai, and several departments that were originally in Xiaomu were all mobilized, and the capital was full of people looking for the murderer. Chen Huang even expressed angrily that once the murderer is caught, he will be punished immediately and will never tolerate it. Although the punishment of lingqi was not abolished by Chen State, it was not used for a long time. This is a punishment that would only be used for the most heinous crimes. Wu Lihao's son was dead, and it could be revealed easily. The eldest son of the Tang family was dead, and the capital searched for the murderer for a while but failed, so it was left unsolved. But not this time. This is a matter of royal majesty and decency. He dares to kill King Kong today, King Duan tomorrow, and the emperor the day after tomorrow. Killing the emperor is rebellion. Rebels will kill the 9 tribes and suffer the punishment of lingqi, which is not excessive at all. The assassination of a prince has never happened in the capital. Firstly, it is a capital crime and no one dares to commit it. Secondly, these princes have high status and will bring sufficient guards every time they go out, so no one can do it. King Kong is an exception among the princes. Since his downfall, his advisors have run away and his servants have dispersed. In the past few months, he has been walking alone, which just gave the thieves an opportunity to take advantage of. After King Kong was assassinated, he was immediately taken into the palace and looked after closely by the imperial physician. Zhao Man had just returned from a visit in the palace. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What's wrong with King Kong?" Zhao Man said, "The imperial doctor said that he almost hurt his lungs, but he lost too much blood, and his life is no longer in danger now." Prince Kong came out of the palace yesterday, and when he returned to Prince Kang's mansion, he was stabbed by someone who rushed out from the dark. After the murderer hit him, he rushed into the crowd and disappeared. In anger, Emperor Chen ordered his people to kill the whole person. The capital turned around and wanted to find the murderer and execute him Ling Qi. However, this murderer was obviously not an experienced hand. This knife just missed the vital point. If it had been moved an inch to the side, King Kong would have become King Kong. Zhao Man looked at him and asked with a pale face, "They all said that Brother Duan wanted to kill Brother Kong. Is it true?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "It's hard to say. Now that King Kong had nothing, what could he use to fight with King Duan? Logically speaking, King Duan did not need to kill everyone to leave an excuse for himself. When he comes to power, he can do whatever he wants with King Kong, there is no need to rush. But maybe, what if King Duan is such an impatient person and wants to avoid this trouble? However, it cannot be ruled out that this is a very expensive trick played by King Kong. People like them, who play tricks all day long, are cruel to others, and are also cruel to themselves. The fact that they stabbed themselves and brought down King Duan is also it's not that it can't be done. This is just Tang Ning's guess. As for what the inside story is, it depends on Chen Wang's investigation. Royal Palace, a certain hall. Concubine Zhang Xian sat by the bed, looked at the pale and bloodless King Kong, and asked worriedly, "How is my son?" A smile appeared on King Kang's face and he said, "Don't worry, mother and concubine. The imperial doctor said she won't die." Concubine Zhang Xian grabbed his hand, cried bitterly, and said sadly, "My son is already like this, what else do they want from you?" There were footsteps at the door, and Chen Huang walked slowly into the hall. Concubine Zhang Xian looked back, stood up, walked quickly to him, knelt down on the ground, and cried, "Your Majesty, I beg your Majesty, please let Cheng Er return to the fiefdom, he can no longer stay in the capital, I concubine I only have such a son, I can't watch him die." Huang Chen said with a sullen face, "Stupid, do you think he can survive if he goes to the fief? If he goes to the fief, he will only die faster." Concubine Zhang Xian's body trembled and she said sadly, "Your Majesty, please save Cheng Er, he is your son. You haven't slept all night. Go back to the palace and rest first. I will get to the bottom of this matter." Emperor Chen looked at the maid behind concubine Zhang Xian and said in a deep voice, "Why don't you help concubine Xian back to the palace?" "Yes." The two palace maids hurriedly helped concubine Zhang Xian out. Emperor Chen walked to the bed. Prince Kong struggled to stand up. Emperor Chen stepped forward quickly, helped him lie down, and said, "You are injured, please don't worry." King Kong said weakly, "Thank you, father." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "What happened last night? Do you remember? Did you see the man's face clearly?" King Kong shook his head and said, "After leaving the palace last night, I returned home alone. When I passed a dark alley, someone rushed out of the alley, stabbed me with a knife and rushed into the crowd. He was masked, so I didn't see his face clearly." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "Have you offended anyone recently, or are you suspicious of anyone?" King Kong looked into his eyes, smiled helplessly, and said, "No." After a pause, he said again, "Father, after my injury is healed, I will return to my fiefdom, and I will not stay in the capital to cause trouble to you." Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "I asked you to stay in the capital, so you stay in the capital. I want to see if some people are so bold that they are lawless." He walked out of the hall and stopped when he reached a corridor. He looked ahead and asked, "Tell me, was this done by Prince Duan, or was it a self-torture trick by Prince Kong?" No one responded to him for a long time. He looked back at Wei Jian, and said angrily, "I'm asking you a question, are you deaf?" Wei Jian raised his head, looked at him in surprise, and asked, "Did your Majesty say anything just now? Your ears are really problematic." Emperor Chen looked at him angrily, and finally waved his hand. Thinking of the situation just now, he said in a deep voice, "Chen's expression doesn't seem fake, I can't see any flaws, it shouldn't be him," and according to the imperial physician, if the knife had been half an inch to the left, his life would have been gone. He couldn't take such a big risk to frame Ming-er, not to mention that he could have just said who he suspected. He thought for a while, looked at Wei Jian, and said, "Announce Prince Duan to enter the palace." This chapter is first published on AIU Voice Novel Network. Please remember the website address. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 255. Tang Ning sat in the pavilion, facing the mirror, making expressions of happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy. Tang Yao Yao sat opposite him, holding her chin and looking at him, and asked, "Did you take the wrong medicine?" After observing for a long time, Tang Ning found that the expression he could control best was expressionless. No joy or sadness, no anger or anger, so that others could not see his inner thoughts, which seemed better than deliberately making those exaggerated expressions. Tang Yao Yao held her chin with one hand and asked, "You just beat those people, will you be okay?" Tang Ning glanced at her and said, "I only beat one person, those were beaten by you." Tang Yao Yao straightened his chest, "You asked me to beat them." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Don't worry, good brothers are loyal. If the higher ups blame me, I can take it alone." The Hanlin Academy attendant from the Tang family was carried back by the yamen runners of Jingzhou Prefecture. Although Tang Ning was familiar with Chen law, he could not find an applicable clause for beating an official of the court. The Imperial Academy's attendant is a 6th rank official, and the Imperial Academy's compiler is a 6th rank official, which means that the Tang is one rank higher than him and is his immediate superior. Beating up an immediate superior can be a big deal or a small deal, but since the beating has already happened, it depends on how the emperor will judge. Qing trotted over and said, "Son-in-law, there are people outside again." This time, it was not the people from the county government, but 2 female officials from the palace. A female official looked at him and said, "Master Tang, the Tang family suspects that you hid the second daughter of the Tang family. His Majesty asked us to clear your suspicion and make the Tang family speechless." Tang Ning looked at the female official and said politely, "Thank you for your help." The female official smiled and said, "Master Tang, you are too polite." The female officials from the palace were much more polite than the yamen runners and constables in Jingzhou Prefecture. They knew to knock on the door when entering the room, and their movements were also very gentle. After checking every room, they came out and said, "I'm sorry to trouble Master Tang." "It's okay." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Take care." The female official looked at him and said with a smile, "His Majesty said that Master Tang should go back to the palace with us." The emperor summoned him, so he naturally had to go. Tang Ning followed the 2 female officials into the palace, and was led by a eunuch to the imperial study again. This was his second time entering the palace today. He walked to the center of the hall, bowed and said, "I am guilty." Emperor Chen looked up at him and asked, "Oh, what crime have you committed? Tell me." Tang Ning said loudly, "I beat my superior, please punish me, Your Majesty." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "Don't you want to defend yourself?" Tang Ning said, "I have nothing to say about my crime, and I am willing to be punished." Emperor Chen was silent for a moment and asked, "Do you regret it?" "I don't regret it." Tang Ning raised his head and said, "If it happens again, even if Your Majesty will punish me severely, I will still do it and will never regret it. Emperor Chen glanced at him and said, okay, although you beat your superior, there is a reason for it, and I will not punish you. Tang Ning bowed his hands and said, Your Majesty, don't be embarrassed, I am willing to bear all the consequences of my actions. I said I won't punish you, no one dares to punish you. Emperor Chen showed a look of relief in his eyes, and said, as for your mother's affairs, I will continue to investigate. This time, I promised you a reward that I failed to fulfill. You can change another one. Tang Ning had no expression on his face and said, I don't want any reward. If you can't think of it for a while, I will remember it for you first. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, I hope you won't be affected too much by these things. Go to the Hanlin Academy as soon as possible and get familiar with the rules of the court as soon as possible. I have high expectations for you and hope you won't let me down. Tang Ning bowed and said, I will remember your Majesty's teachings. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, it's getting late, you go back first. Tang Ning bowed, I'm leaving. Tang Ning walked out of the imperial study, and several figures walked out of the back hall. An old man in green bowed and said, Your Majesty, there are many experts in the Tang mansion, and the defense is not weak. I think the defense strength at night will be even higher. It is difficult to sneak into the Tang family unless you are a top player in the world. It is impossible to bring someone out quietly. Another old man thought for a while and said, unless this person has superb light skills, or his martial arts have really reached a superb level, but there are only a handful of such people in the world, and they will not be easily driven by others. Emperor Chen stood up from his seat and said, that means, Tang Yu was really hidden by the Tang family themselves. The old man in green thought for a while and said, it is not 100% possible, and it is also impossible to bring someone out quietly 90%. Emperor Chen nodded and said, yes, if he had the ability to take his mother out quietly, he would have done so long ago, and would not have waited until now, going around in circles for so long, and Tang Jing would not have suffered such a disaster today. Ling Yun thought for a while and asked, Your Majesty, then this case. Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, let the people below investigate. The meaning of handing it over to the people below is that there will be no strict investigation. After Ling Yun understood, he nodded and said, as you wish. Emperor Chen rubbed his eyebrows and waved his hand, saying, okay, I'm a little tired, you guys go down first. I'll take my leave. I'll take my leave. Ling Yun left the hall and walked down the steps, seemingly asking casually, Eunuch Wei, do you think the Tang family will do something to deceive the emperor for the sake of face? Wei Jian yawned and said, Your Majesty is tired, and I am a little tired too. After all, I am old and not as energetic as young people like Commander Ling. He looked at Ling Yun with a smile and said, Commander Ling is young and strong. If he has extra energy, he should train the Imperial Guards more. If he loses to others in the competition, Your Majesty will lose face. Ling Yun watched Wei Jian slowly leave and shook his head inexplicably. Tang Ning walked out of the palace gate and breathed a long sigh of relief. Although the old beggar's action would not leave any traces, it would be tantamount to seeking the skin of a tiger to include the emperor in the calculation. Every step is walking on a tightrope, which is extremely dangerous. He has been testing for so long, including the few days at the Tang family, and it is already clear that the Tang family intends to go all the way and will not compromise. When a noble family doesn't even care about their face, they can only be more shameless than them. The conversation with Emperor Chen just now seemed calm, but it was actually extremely dangerous. The emperor would suspect the Tang family, and naturally he would also suspect him. However, in comparison, the Tang family was much more suspicious. After all, it was much easier for the Tang family to hide a person than for him to steal a living person from the Tang family. When he entered the palace just now, he learned from the little eunuch that Tang Qi was transferred from Dong to Shiran, who was directly involved in court affairs, to the Imperial Academy. He was about to change from a central minister who manipulated the court affairs to a gardener who devoted himself to the great cause of education. This was probably the opportunity that Emperor Chen had been waiting for a long time to weaken the Tang family. Although everyone was using each other, it was better to avoid doing things that were as dangerous as being with a tiger. He didn't know when the tiger would show its power, and he couldn't take his family to seek refuge with Lanlin. The Tang family has undoubtedly been at the forefront of public opinion in the capital in recent days. Both Legend of the White Snake and The Lotus Lantern have been concluded. The endings of the books are all about a family reunion, which naturally satisfies readers. However, the reality is not as perfect as in the books. The top scholar visited his mother 4 times but never saw her. Even if he asked for an imperial decree, he was rejected by the ruthless Tang family. The Tang family would not openly disobey the imperial decree. Once Miss Tang appeared again, the Tang family would be deceiving the emperor, which means that the top scholar would never see his biological mother. As for the poor Miss Tang, whether she was sent away or killed, no one knows except the Tang family. In just a few days, the people in Beijing despised and disdained the Tang family. For the fastest update of error-free novels, please visit and bookmark this site to read the latest novels. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 256. Scorn and contempt cannot have a substantial impact on the Tang family in the short term. There are also some things that are not accessible to ordinary people. For example, Tang Qi was transferred from Dong to Shiren, who was directly involved in state affairs, to the Imperial Academy to serve as doctor of the Imperial Academy. It seemed to be an equal promotion, but in fact he was demoted. The 3 brothers of the Tang family each held important positions in the court. Tang Hui, as the Minister of Rites, was in charge of the imperial examinations and the ceremonial system. Tang Qi, the member of the Dongta family, had the responsibility of supervising the officials and serving as advisors. Tang Jing, the member of the Zongsha family, often accompanied the emperor, drafted imperial edicts, and was also in charge of the central government. Secretarial affairs, able to directly participate in confidential national affairs. These 3 people are the 3 legs of the huge tripod of the Tang family. Now that Tang Qi has been demoted, 1 leg has been destroyed. Although the Tang family can still stand on 2 legs, it is not as stable as before. In order to support King Duan in recent years, the Tang family has planted many party members in the court. It is the consensus of the courtiers that they have become too powerful. Your Majesty took this opportunity to cut off the Tang family. This will weaken and beat the Tang family. I think it will last for a long time. Within a short period of time, both the Tang family and Prince Duan will keep a low profile and will not make any more attention-grabbing actions. When things have developed to the point where they are now, the cause is no longer important. What the Tang family did wrong and right 20 years ago, and where the second young lady of the Tang family went, are not as important as the result. There are also thoughtful people, whether in the court or among the people. If you think about it carefully, it seems that there has been an invisible pushing hand from the beginning, pushing the Tang family to the edge step by step, although every step is very complicated. It was small, but when the Tang family came to their senses, there was no turning back. Before officially taking office, Tang Ning still has a final period of freedom. Sometimes he and Xiaoi go to the county government office, sometimes he and Zaira go to Sansu's shop, and occasionally he and Xiaoju go to Tianrunja for dinner. Most of the time, he stays at home, teaching Xiao Xiao how to read. By the way, I helped Fang Xiaoyu, who had delayed her homework because of cooking, with her homework. In the past few days, people from the Jingzhou government office have gone to the county government office to search, to Sansu's shop, to Tianashanju, and even to all the houses on this street, but of course there was no result. Jingzhou Mansion Office. Jing Zheyin rubbed his head and murmured, "Where can a living person go? These days, both the imperial court and the Tang family were pressing hard on this case, but they searched all the places they could think of, but still couldn't find the person. A man with a pale face and a beardless face stood behind him, thought for a while, and said, "Sir, this case is not a serious murder case. The government can do its best. We can't find people who can't even be found by the Ministry of Justice and the palace, which is also excusable." Jing Ziyin rubbed his eyebrows again and said, "It's not like the palace, Your Majesty didn't push me very much, but the Tang family did push me a little." The white-faced man smiled and said, "If it's the Tang family, you don't have to worry. You might as well think about it. It's not something that just anyone can do to hide a person from everyone. It can be done. If the Tang family didn't press hard enough, wouldn't they tell everyone that they did it?" "It makes sense." Jing Ziyin nodded and said, "Then let them all come back. The government office is too busy with things. How can I have time to play with them in this trick of hiding people and finding people?" In the afternoon, the old beggar told him that everyone who had been watching outside these days had left. When Tang Ning saw Xiaoju, she asked, "Are you going to Tianashanju?" Xiaoju was stunned and said, "I had already eaten when I came here." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Eat some more and I'll treat you." After entering Tianashanju, Tang Ning led him to a pavilion and said, "Whatever you want to eat, just order it." Xiaoju heard the underlying meaning of his words and asked, "What about you?" Tang Ning smiled at him, "You know." Xiaoju was stunned for a moment, and then said suddenly, "You said there was nothing wrong with you." Only now did he realize that Tang Ning had asked him to come over not because she wanted to invite him to dinner, but because she wanted to use him as a cover to have a secret meeting with her lover. Xiaoju sat down at the table, gritted his teeth and said, "I want the most expensive one." Even if he ordered shark's fin, bird's nest, and abalone, it was all free of charge. Tang Ning didn't feel bad at all. She left the main building, walked to a small courtyard by the lake, and knocked on the door. It was Xiao Tao who opened the door. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Is your lady here?" "Miss is in the room." Xiao Tao looked at him and said casually, then walked to the yard and continued to play her takraw ball. Tang Ning walked to Su Mei's door, knocked on the door, and walked in. She saw Su Mei rolling around on the bed with the doll in her arms. Tang Ning asked, "Is it useful?" Su Mei got up from the bed, looked at him, and said, "It's useful, but it's still not as useful to you. Are you here to accompany me? This time it's something serious." Su Mei wrinkled her nose and asked, "Isn't it serious to stay with me?" "For it." Before Tang Ning could answer, she got off the bed, put on her shoes, and said, "Come with me." Tang Ning followed her around to the backyard. There was no door in the backyard, only a wall. Su Mei flew over the wall lightly. Tang Ning was not as cool as she was, but she still climbed over easily. Su Mei looked at him and said, "You are quite skilled at climbing over the wall." Tang Ning said modestly, "The more you read it, the more you'll become proficient." Tang Yao Yao taught him how to climb over the wall. Rich man Tang never gave him a good look. Tang Ning didn't want to meet him through the main entrance. In recent days, she became more and more fond of this simple, fast and convenient method. Outside the courtyard wall is another courtyard. This courtyard has no doors and is closed on all sides. If you don't climb in from outside the courtyard wall, you usually won't find that there is an outdoor cave here. There was a woman sitting in the small courtyard. When she saw Tang Ning, a smile appeared on her face. She stood up and said, "Ning you're here." In fact, according to Tang Ning's original plan, after the impact of the legend of White Snake and Lotus Lantern, if the Tang family still wanted to lose face, they might make some compromises under the offensive of public opinion. But the reality was not what he expected. No matter how much the people cursed and scorned them, the Tang family remained unmoved and continued to be shameless to the end, So Tang Ning had no choice but to be even more shameless than them. It's easy to do something impulsively, but it's hard to deal with the aftermath. If he hid her in the house, she would be easily found, so he needed to find someone he could trust and have the ability to hide her. As the saying goes, if you cultivate for 100 years, you can cross the same boat, and if you cultivate for 1,000 years, you can sleep on the same pillow. Calculating this, he and Su Mei have been destined for at least tens of thousands of years. Tang Yu held his hand and said, "You should be careful outside. Don't be impulsive when things happen. You should put safety first." "Don't worry," Tang Ning said with a smile on her face, "one day, we will go out openly." Tang Yu smiled and said, "I'm used to living here, and I'm very satisfied that I can see you often. You have to thank Mayor properly." Tang Ning nodded and said, "I will." He sat in the courtyard for a while and talked before returning to Su Mei's courtyard. Su Mei looked back at him and said, "You are committing the crime of deceiving the emperor. If you are found out, you will lose your head. Aren't you afraid that I will report you?" "I'm not afraid." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I believe you." The look in Su Mei's eyes flashed away. She blinked and said, "You don't even know my real details, yet you dare to say that you believe me. Don't you know that the more beautiful a woman is, the more likely she is to lie to others?" Tang Ning looked her up and down and asked, "Are you beautiful?" Su Mei looked at him with a smile, cracked her knuckles, and asked, "What do you think?" "I think it's pretty." Tang Ning decided to follow her heart. The smile on Su Mei's face became brighter and she asked, "My mother just said that you should thank me properly. How do you plan to thank me?" Tang Ning corrected her, "What about my mother?" "That's my mother." Su Mei glanced at him and said, "You don't know yet, but I have already accepted her as my godmother." Tang Ning was stunned and asked, "When?" "Yesterday." No wonder Tang Ning felt weird when she called Su Mei Meyer just now. He looked at Su Mei and asked, "How do you want to thank me?" Su Mei thought for a moment and said, "This is a huge kindness. How about you pledge yourself to me?" "This won't work." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I have already promised it to someone else." "Then you come here often and stay with our mother." Su Mei put her arms around his shoulders and said, "At least once every 5 days. You must be obedient, God brother." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 257. Su Mei walked back to the room, walked to the bed, and slapped the big doll hard on the butt. An old woman came out of the room and said expressionlessly, "You shouldn't have taken this trouble." "What kind of trouble is this?" Su Mei said indifferently, "It's not delaying the serious business. I'm not your servant. I can do whatever I want." The old woman frowned slightly and said, "I didn't raise you to talk back to you. You have had too much contact with that boy these days, and you have learned bad things from him. Why don't you learn to talk back to him? You're young and you don't feel ashamed to speak." Su Mei glanced at her sideways and said, "Don't worry, I'm sensible and won't miss our business." Inexplicably, another god sister appeared, but Tang Ning actually refused in her heart. Before this level of relationship existed, Su Hu was already on the verge of going to heaven in front of him. Now that she had this level of relationship as an excuse, she still didn't really go to heaven. A cousin and a god sister are nothing to save money on. The women around him are more unfriendly than the last. Fortunately, there are Xiru and Xiaoai, who can bring him some comfort in the dead of night. He originally planned to stay lazy at home for a few more days, but Xiaoju has already entered the palace to be his captain of Yulin. Gu Bai and Kui Lang entered the Hanlin Academy a month ago. If he delays it any longer, someone will probably come to the door to urge you. What's more, Huang Chen also said last time that he should join the job earlier. Now August is coming soon, and there are only a few days left before the deadline. Tang Ning has to report honestly even if she is reluctant. The Hanlin Academy is different from the 6 ministries. One of the important responsibilities of the Hanlin Academy is to serve as the emperor's secretary and advisor. A secretary naturally has to stay with the boss. Some things that do not require the emperor to do it directly are left to the secretary. Therefore, the location of Hanlin Academy is also within the imperial palace. Tang Ning's official position is Hanlin compilation. The specific work he does depends on the arrangement. He has an official position of 6th rank, which is neither high nor low in the Hanlin Academy. There is also a 5th rank Hanlin bachelor and a 5th rank attendant. There are 2 bachelor's degree students and 2 bachelor's lecturers, and there are 2 senior 6th-level ministers and lecturers. In addition, there are also several Hanlin editors with the same rank as him. He entered the palace with a seal at the palace gate, and was then taken to the Hanlin Academy by a young eunuch. Yesterday, she made an appointment with Gu Bai. When Tang Ning arrived at the entrance of the Hanlin Academy, Gu Bai was waiting for him at the door. Master Bachelor is not here today, I will take you to report first. Gu Bai has been in the Hanlin Academy for more than a month, so he is naturally more familiar with it. The scale of the Hanlin Academy was larger than he imagined. There were rows of rooms filled with shadows. Gu Bai led him directly to a room in the innermost room. Gu Bai walked into the inner room and said to the 2 officials, Master Kong, Master Fang, I have brought the new champion to report. One of them stood up, looked at Tang Ning, and said, the number 1 scholar is finally here. Your Majesty has sent people to ask you several times in the past few days. If you don't come again, I will personally visit you. Tang Ning apologized, something happened at home recently, which delayed us for a while. Please forgive me, Mr. Kong. It doesn't matter, Mr. Kong waved his hand. He knew what the something happened the number 1 scholar said about him. He had been fighting with the Tang family these days, but he had shocked countless people in the capital. Although he still didn't win in the end, the Tang family lost even more miserably, losing their reputation and losing more people. This was the biggest loss the Tang family had suffered in the past 10 years. Lord Kong looked at him and said, you have just arrived at the Hanlin Academy. In the past 2 days, I will ask Gu Bai to take you to familiarize yourself with this place. As for what you will do in the future, His Majesty may have other arrangements. Mr. Kong only said a few words and then asked Gu Bai to take him around the Hanlin Academy. As for Mr. Fang, he had been sleeping on the table since Tang Ning came in, without even raising his head once. Gu Bai walked out with him and said, let me introduce you to the adults from the Hanlin Academy first. Master Bachelor is busy with official duties and rarely comes to the Imperial Academy. The people I took you to meet just now are Lord Kong and Lord Fang. Both of them are bachelors, and in this Hanlin Academy, apart from the bachelors, they have the most power. Tang Ning looked back and said, what's going on with Mr. Fang? Master Fang, Gu Bai shook his head and said, he is a weirdo. He doesn't care about the affairs of the Imperial Academy. You can just pretend that he doesn't exist on weekdays and don't provoke him. When the bachelor is away, the affairs of the Imperial Academy, Mr. Kong usually makes the decision. Gu Bai then took him to see the 2 bachelors who served as lecturers. After that, he walked into another duty room and said, this is Mr. Wang, the lecturer. The attendant is a 6th level attendant, half a level higher than Tang Ning. After getting to know each other, Tang Ning casually asked, is there only one attendant? That Wang Shidu shook his head and said, Tang Shidu was beaten and injured a few days ago, and he has not recovered yet. Tang Ning then remembered something and sighed, it's really too much. Expressing sympathy and regret for the attendant with the same surname as him, Tang Ning walked around the other duty rooms, brushed her face, and led Gu Bai to her own duty room. Besides him, there were 2 other people in the duty room. The office areas were separate and separated from each other by bead curtains. Everyone had their own private space. Tang Ning had just come to the Hanlin Academy, and he had not been assigned any tasks. He flipped through the book full of Hanlin Academy rules and regulations page by page. The highest official in the Hanlin Academy was only the 5th rank. In the entire Hanlin Academy, if there was no special decree, only one Hanlin scholar, 2 reading scholars, and 2 lecturers were qualified to attend the morning court. This meant that he did not have to get up so early every day. He could report to the government office at around 7 a.m. and go home at 3 p.m. He would have a day off every 5 days, and work 5 days and rest 1 day, which was quite humane. Of course, even these rules were flexible. Tang Ning scanned them at the fastest speed and felt that they were acceptable. He was scanning the regulations in the duty room, but the entire Hanlin Academy became a little boiling because of his arrival. The new champion has finally arrived. He is the only one who has not been hired this month. He also won the top 3 prizes. I wonder who is better, him or Mr. Fang. It's really hard to compare. Both of them won the top 3 prizes. It is said that Mr. Fang got all the answers right in the first round, and his policy essay was jointly recommended, almost sweeping all the candidates that year. Although Mr. Fang is powerful, the poetry madman is not a pushover. It is said that although his policy essay is mediocre, his vision is really sharp, and his poetry is really powerful. Counting hundreds or thousands of years, I am afraid that he is not among those literary masters. I heard that Tang Shidu was injured and has been recuperating at home these days. He beat me. Our Hanlin Academy will be very lively in the future. In the Imperial Study, Emperor Chen read a few memorials, and Wei Jian came up and said, "Your Majesty, Xiao Tang has joined the Hanlin Academy today." Oh, Emperor Chen put down his pen and said, "He finally came." Wei Jian said, "Mr. Kong sent someone to ask if your Majesty has any arrangements for him." Emperor Chen thought for a while and said, "Since he has come to the Hanlin Academy, Yuener can no longer act like before. Since Yuener is willing to listen to him, let him be responsible for Yuener's homework in addition to the affairs of the Hanlin Academy." Wei Jian nodded, "I will send someone to pass on the message." In the harem, a palace somewhere. A pretty maid walked into the palace quickly and said, "Your Majesty, that person has entered the palace today." A 15 or 16-year-old girl lay on the bed, raised her legs, and swung irregularly. She stuffed a piece of preserved fruit into her mouth and asked, "Who entered the palace?" The maid whispered, "It's the one who hurt Master Tang Jing." "What?" The girl jumped off the bed, her pretty face full of anger, and said, "That evil man dared to hurt Brother Jing, causing me not to see him for a long time. Go call a few people, and we will go and settle the score with him." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 258. The girl led a group of eunuchs and maids and ran out of the palace gate in a mighty manner. A female officer chased her out and said hurriedly, "Princess, princess, please change your clothes before going out." The girl waved her hand and said, "I won't change it. If the evil man runs away, who will I seek revenge from?" The group of people ran rampant in the palace, and the maids and eunuchs on the road dodged one after another. Tang Ning was sitting in her check-in room for more than an hour. There was no one above to arrange work for him, and he had nothing to do. He could only sit and wait for get-off work to come off. Fortunately, although most of the yamen in Chen State go to work at 7 o'clock, they can clock in and go home after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, leaving a lot of time at their disposal. Every department was out of office and the palace school was out. Fang Xiaoyu was about to get out of school at about the same time. She made an appointment with Tang Ning yesterday to go back together today. She also said that she had figured out a new recipe for millefeuille cake and brought it to the palace for him to try today. Fang Xiaoyu is very persistent no matter what she does, both in food and in food. She once learned cooking skills from Xiao Yi, but she is not limited to what she learned. She can often use her own brain, draw inferences from one example and make many things. Kind of change. From Fang Menyu, who only knew how to eat, to Fang Xiaoyu, who is now a superb cook and can fit into an IKEA home, the age-old saying of a woman has indeed made her 18th transformation. After the Sanya's gong sounded, it indicated that it was time to go back. Tang Ning stood up and walked out of the door when she saw Academician Fang staggering out of the door, as if he hadn't woken up. There is such a strange person in the Imperial Academy, and no one cares about sleeping during working hours. Tang Ning shook her head, and when she was about to leave, she was stopped by Gu Bai. Tang Ning looked at him and asked doubtfully, "Is there anything else?" Gu Bai looked at him and said, "After the gong sounds, we have to wait until several bachelors leave before we can leave. This is the rule of the Hanlin Academy." Tang Ning understood this rule, even in future generations. Those who left work earlier than their bosses generally did not have a good future. After finally waiting for the 3 bachelors to leave, Fang Xiaoyu was probably waiting impatiently. Tang Ning walked out of the Hanlin Academy gate when a stern voice suddenly came from the side. "Stop! Are you Tang Ning?" Tang Ning turned around and saw a 15 or 16-year-old girl looking at her menacingly. He confirmed that he didn't recognize her, and just as he was about to speak, the expression on his face suddenly froze. Not far ahead, Fang Xiaoyu spread out her handkerchief and handed the contents to someone like a treasure. The man waved his hand impatiently, and the handkerchief fell to the ground. She hurriedly went to pick it up, but her foot stumbled and she accidentally fell to the ground. The man didn't look at her and walked straight ahead. "Hey, I'm asking you, are you Tang Ning?" The girl looked at him, put her hands on her hips, and said angrily, "Are you deaf? Hey, where are you going?" She watched Tang Ning leave without saying a word. After being stunned for a moment, her face became even more angry and she said angrily, "You, stop, don't run." Tang Ning walked up behind the shaky figure and patted him on the shoulder. The man turned around and saw a fist that quickly enlarged in front of his eyes. Boom! The man didn't seem to expect that someone would sneak up on him from behind. He was stunned in place. Before he could react, he had already received a heavy kick in his lower abdomen. His body was unstable and he was kicked to the ground. Tang Ning didn't stop, bloodshot eyes appeared in her eyes, she grabbed him by the collar, punched him in the face one after another, and said in a cold voice, "Children bully you too, you are no longer a human being." At this moment, he didn't know who the bachelor was who was punched in the face by him. He only knew that he had just bullied Fang Xiaoyu, who had lived and died with him and called him brother Tang Ning. Xiaoyu was bullied by this guy in front of him. The girl had already chased Tang Ning. When she saw the scene in front of her, especially Tang Ning's fierce look, her face turned pale and she said in a trembling voice, You stand." Tang Ning's anger was still lingering in her heart, so she turned to look at her and said fiercely, "You're in trouble." I. The girl looked at him, her lips moved, and looking at his slightly ferocious expression, she suddenly pursed her lips and tears fell down. She squatted on the ground and sobbed, You harsh me, how dare you bully me?" Fang Xiaoyu ran over and said in panic, "Brother Tang Ning, please stop fighting, he is my father." "What?" Tang Ning grabbed Mr. Fang's collar and looked at Fang Xiaoyu, confused, "Is he your father?" She let go of her hand, and Fang Xiaoyu hurriedly supported Academician Fang and whispered, He is my father." Tang Ning clenched her fists, and the anger in her heart not only did not decrease, but actually increased. Fang Xiaoyu rarely mentioned his father. Tang Ning did not associate Bachelor Fang with her at all. What he didn't expect was that his attitude towards his daughter was so bad that it was even worse than towards a stranger. Thinking of this, he clenched his fists tighter. Seeing the tears in Fang Xiaoyu's eyes, he resisted the urge to beat him again and loosened his clenched fists. Not far away, the forbidden army began to rush over. Xiaoju trotted over, looked at him, and said in shock, "What's going on?" At this time, it was time to leave the office. At the entrance of the Hanlin Academy, the officials of the Hanlin Academy who were about to go home were all looking at the scene with their mouths open. Even before Hanlin editor joined the job, he had already beaten Hanlin attendant, causing him to still rest at home. On his first day of employment, he again beat up a bachelor's student in full view of the public. Could he be the nemesis of Hanlin Academy officials and want to attack all Hanlin Academy officials? From the 6th grade to the 5th grade, if this trend continues, the next one he will take action will be the bachelor. Xiaoju looked at academician Fang, whose face was bruised and swollen, and then looked at Tang Ning, confused. "Are you crazy?" Royal study room. Zhao Yuan sat at the table, took a piece of green vegetables for Emperor Chen, and said, "Father, eat more vegetables, it is good for your health." Chen Huang took a bite of green vegetables, then looked at him and praised, "Yuan's cooking skills have improved again." Zhao Yuan smiled honestly and said, "Assorted pots are the most delicious thing in the world. I must make the most delicious assorted pots." He actually felt that the most delicious assorted pot was the first time he had it. Although it only took a few bites, he could still recall the delicious taste at that time. It's a pity that since then, he has never had as delicious assorted pots as the first time. Emperor Chen looked at him and said with a smile, "Yuan, you like cooking. My father will not stop you, but you can't neglect your homework. You must study more so that you can become a useful person in the future." Zhao Yuan patted his chest and said, "Father, don't worry, I will complete the homework assigned by the gentleman seriously every time." When he said this, he felt a little sad. He actually didn't want to finish it seriously. He also wanted to learn cooking like his cousin, but his cousin had a husband to help him with his homework, so he could only write it by himself. Your husband has already entered the Hanlin Academy. If there is anything you don't understand about his studies, you can go to the Hanlin Academy and ask him. Chen Huang touched his head and said, "Your husband is a very capable person, man, you should learn more from him." As soon as he finished speaking, a eunuch walked in and said, "Your Majesty, Commander Ling would like to see you." Chen Huang raised his head and said, "Let him come in." After a while, Ling Yun walked in from outside the palace, raised his head and looked at it, but stopped talking. Chen Huang looked at him and asked, "What's wrong?" Ling Yun opened his mouth and said, Tang Ning just beat up the bachelor Fang Zhe outside the Hanlin Academy." It was in full view of everyone. All the officials of the Hanlin Academy saw it with their own eyes. At this moment, he has been captured by the Imperial Army and is waiting for His Majesty's punishment. Zhao Yuan looked embarrassed and said, "Father, I don't know martial arts. I'm not as powerful as my husband. I can't beat anyone. I really can't learn this." Bah! The piece of tofu that Chen Huang had just picked up fell to the ground together with the chopsticks. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 259. He beat Fang Zhe again. Chen Huang stood there in a daze, unable to look around. He has a grudge against Fang Zhe. Ling Yun shook his head and said, "I don't know." Chen Huang thought for a while and asked, "How is Mr. Fang?" Ling Yun said, "The flesh injury is nothing serious." Chen Huang frowned and said, "For no reason, why did he beat Fang Zhe? Come and see with me." As soon as he finished speaking, a figure ran in from outside, hugged him tightly, and sobbed, "Father, you have to make the decision for me." Chen Huang looked down at the girl and asked, "Manner, what's wrong with you? Who bullied you?" The girl wiped her tears and said, "That's the evil person named Tang Ning." Huang Chen was shocked. "What, Tang Ning bullied you? How did he bully you?" He dared to hurt me." The girl rubbed her eyes and said, "Father, you have to avenge me." Chen Huang thought for a while, nodded and said, "Don't worry Manur, my father will avenge you soon. My father will have his head chopped off." The girl panicked, hugged his arm, and said hurriedly, "Father, I didn't let father chop off his head, you can just have someone beat him a few times." Chen Huang raised the corners of his lips and asked, "How could he be so cruel to you when he is so good?" The girl wrung her fingers and said, He beat brother Zheng. I was so angry that I asked him to reason with him. Then he beat that person again and was fierce at me. He was very, very fierce." Chen Huang looked at her and asked with a smile, "Why would he hit someone?" The girl frowned and said angrily, "Because that person pushed down a little sister. He is so bad. He even bullies children. He is a little worse than that Tangning, no, a lot worse." Huang Chen patted her hand and said with a smile, "Don't worry, my father will make the decision for you." A look of pride appeared on the girl's face and she said, "Father, I will spank him at least 10 times, until his butt will bloom." From a side hall somewhere in the palace, an imperial doctor came out and said, "Your Majesty, Madam, Master Fang's injuries are all superficial wounds, nothing serious. No need to apply any medicine, he will be fine soon." Fang Shifei breathed a sigh of relief, frowned again, and murmured, "Why would little miracle Dr. Tang beat him? He has never offended anyone." The beautiful girl said with added jealousy, "He deserves it. He bullies a child. This is a bad guy beating a bad guy." Fang Xinyu gently tugged on concubine's shoe sleeves, her eyes filled with tears, and said, "And, please, don't put brother Tangning in jail." Concubine Fang Shu was stunned, and immediately figured out the details. She looked slightly angry and said, "This shameless bastard, little miracle Dr. Tang did a good job." "Your Majesty, this has nothing to do with little miracle Dr. Tang. I will let you do it, brother, go back and teach him a lesson." After receiving the news, Fang Hong, who had arrived in a hurry, wiped the sweat from his forehead and saluted Emperor Chen. Then he looked at concubine Fang Shu and asked, "How is it? Is fourth brother okay?" "It's okay." Concubine Fang Shu held Fang Xiaoyu's hand and said, "Little miracle Dr. Tang did a good job. These punches should be able to wake him up. Look at how well he has become over the years." Calm down, Emperor Chen looked at concubine Fang Shu's angry look, patted her hand and said, "Since concubine Shu has said so, I will not punish him, Ling Yun, let him go." Tang Ning was imprisoned in a side hall somewhere, waiting for the result of Emperor Chen's punishment. Xiao Ju stood beside him, lamenting, "How did Fang Zhe offend you? He is usually very strange. He is not only your immediate boss's immediate boss, but also Fang Shifei's younger brother. You beat him up. If this happens, things will definitely not get better. How can you survive in the Hanlin Academy?" Tang Ning didn't think so much just now. He regarded Fang Xiaoyu as his sister. If someone bullied his sister, he would certainly not tolerate it. She just didn't expect that academician Fang was actually her father. For some reason, after knowing this, Tang Ning wanted to punch him even more, and she even regretted that her fist was too light just now. When he thought of this, Ling Yun walked in from the outside and said, "Master Tang, you can leave." Xiao Ju raised his head and asked in surprise, "How did your Majesty punish him?" Ling Yun said, "Concubine Fang Shu and Master Fang Hong interceded for him, and your Majesty did not punish him." "Is this okay?" Xiao Ju was a little surprised and a little regretful. He usually didn't like Fang Zhe, so he should have gone up and put his feet on him just now. Tang Ning walked out of the side hall, only Fang Hong was waiting outside. He had known about the situation of the Fang family before. There were 4 brothers and sisters in the Fang family. Fang Hong was the eldest brother, followed by Fang Shifei. The 3rd child of the Fang family died young, and Fang Xiaoyu's father was the 4th child. But he didn't know until today. The fourth son of the Fang family is actually the half-dead bachelor Fang. Fang Hong looked at him, sighed, and explained, Xiaoyu's father's temperament changed drastically due to certain things in his early years. It has been like this for more than 10 years, so I let Xiaoyu and her mother stay in Lingzhou. My hometown didn't bring them back until a few days ago. Tang Ning said calmly, no matter how his temperament changes, he will always be a father. He is not a good father. Fang Hong looked at him and said, Xiaoyu is innocent. I know you are good to her and she is willing to get close to you. Let her live in your home for the next 2 days. Tang Ning and Fang Hong parted, and when they walked to a certain palace, they saw a small figure standing in front of the palace, secretly wiping tears. Although she was young, she was extremely strong. Tang Ning looked at her from a distance and felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. He walked over, stretched out his hand to her, and said, let's go back. She took out a handkerchief from her arms and said, there is still one piece of the 1,000-flour cake, and it's clean. Tang Ning took the piece of 1,000-flour cake, separated it in half, and handed one half to her. Fang Xiaoyu held his hand and took a step forward. Her feet stumbled and her body swayed. Tang Ning looked at her, frown, knelt down and said, come up. At the entrance of the palace, under the sunset, the figure of the old man was being pulled away with the girl on his back. Fang Xiaoyu lay on Tang Ning's back and muttered as usual. My dad is very powerful. He also won the top prize in the exam before, just like brother Tang Ning. I don't know who is stronger, daddy or brother Tang Ning, but daddy can't beat brother Tang Ning. There were several pieces of 1,000-layer cakes, but unfortunately they were all dirty. It would have been nice if Zhao Yuan had been here just now. He doesn't mind being dirty, so he can eat whatever he wants. In the palace, the beautiful girl shook Emperor Chen's arm and said dissatisfied, Father, why did you let that bad guy go? You clearly promised me that you would vent my anger. Chen Huang shook his head helplessly and said, he beat Tang Jing because Tang Jing broke into his home, and he beat Fang Zhe because Fang Zhe bullied that little girl. Now you still think he is bad guy? The girl thought for a while, frowned and said, then he is still mean to me. She rolled her eyes and said, Father, there are so many officials in the court. One more is not too much, and one less is not too little. Why don't you let him come to my palace as a eunuch? Emperor Chen said quickly, this is not possible. One of these other officials is missing. He cannot be missing. It took more than 10 years for our Chen country to produce this top-ranked #1 scholar. How can we let him enter the palace? Besides, he can't be missing. We already have a family. How can my father separate others? This won't work, that won't work either. The girl said pitifully, if you don't even agree to this request, your father will not love Manner anymore. Emperor Chen patted her hand and said, Manner, stop fooling around. My father still has to review the memorial. You can go out and play by yourself. Oh. The girl responded and walked out reluctantly. She walked out of the royal study room, with a look of shame on her face, clenched her fists, and murmured, you evil person, if you dare to harm this princess, one day you will fall into my hands. Thinking of the evil man falling into her hands and having his pants taken off and beaten by her, the girl couldn't help laughing. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 260. When Tang Ning and Fang Xiaoyu returned home, they found that their father-in-law and mother-in-law were also there. Xiaoyu, eat more, look at how thin you are now. At the dinner table, Chen Yuxian looked at Fang Xiaoyu and said distressedly, "Why are your eyes swollen? Have you been bullied in Gongxiu? If they bully you, tell your husband and let him punish them." "No one bullied me." Fang Xiaoyu became cheerful again. After eating, she and Xiao Xiao went to play in the yard. Chen Yuxian looked at Tang Ning again and asked, "Why did Ning come back so late today? Is there a lot going on in the Hanlin Academy?" "No, there was some delay." Tang Ning shook her head, suddenly looked at Zhou Mingli, and asked, "Has your father-in-law ever heard of Fang Zhe?" Fang Zhe. Tang Ning noticed that when his father-in-law heard the name, his hand holding the chopsticks visibly shook. Chen Yuxian said in surprise, "Is it the Fang Zhe from 14 years ago?" Tang Ning didn't expect that even her mother-in-law had heard of Fang Zhe's name, and added 14 years ago in front of it. At this moment, he was even more curious about what happened to Fang Xiaopang's father. 14 years ago, what old events could make the name Fang Zhe remembered by the mother-in-law who didn't pay much attention to court affairs? Zhou Mingli pondered for a moment and then said, "Fang Zhe is the first top-ranked scholar in the imperial examination since the beginning of Chengguo. He is very knowledgeable. From the state examination to the provincial examination, he ranks first in every test. Just like you, he answered all the questions in the first test. Yes, he was also the leader in the poetry world at that time. Not only that, he was also good at strategy and theory. He had provided many practical strategies for the imperial court before he had even passed the imperial examination. What, he is that beast?" Tang Ning originally wanted to say beast, but then she thought about it. It seemed like she was being scolded as well, so she immediately changed her mind. "He is another top 3 pick. He was able to pass the top 3 examinations, 1 point by luck, and 9 points by cheating. The person who can do this by relying on his own strength cannot be described as a beast. He is simply a fighting beast among beasts." "Fang Zhe and your father-in-law were Jinchi in the same year," Chen Yuxian added. Tang Ning suddenly realized that no wonder his father-in-law acted so strangely when he heard his name. Encountering such an all-round crushing opponent is a nightmare for all candidates in the same year. Zhou Mingli nodded and said, "In that year's imperial examination, everyone only knew Fang Zhe, the top 3 candidate, and the glory of the other candidates was all eclipsed by him, but now, some of these people have reached the 3rd and 4th grades. Fang Zhe should be still in the Hanlin Academy now, right?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "He is now a bachelor. It is actually a very abnormal thing for the former number 1 scholar to become a bachelor's degree scholar. For the number 1 scholars in the past, the Hanlin Academy is just a springboard for them to enter the court. They will only serve as Hanlin editors, and then they will take at least 1 year. In as many as 2 years, they will enter various ministries and take charge of actual duties. Those promoted within the Hanlin Academy are all people with little future. It is extremely incredible that the top 3 scholar actually stayed in the Hanlin Academy for 14 years. Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "Shilang Fang said that something happened that caused his temperament to change drastically." Zhou Mingli nodded and said, "I don't know the details. It is said that Fang Zhe was in love with a girl back then, but the Fang family had already arranged a marriage for him. After Fang Zhe got married, the depression turned into illness, and soon he died of depression. From then on, Fang Zhe's temperament changed drastically. He had no interest in court affairs, and he was confused every day." Tang Ning walked out of the room and sighed softly in her heart when she saw Fang Xiaoyu practicing martial arts with Xiao Xiao in the yard. The woman Fang Zhe once liked died in depression. Needless to say, Fang Xiaoyu's mother was the woman Fang Zhe married according to the family arrangement. For this reason, Fang Zhe never had any friendship with their mother and daughter. Tang Ning deeply sympathized with what happened to Bachelor Fang. He was a victim of this feudal system, but at the same time, he had an unshirkable responsibility for both Fang Xiaoyu and the 4th lady of the Fang mansion. This is the responsibility of a husband and a father. Because the beloved woman abandoned herself for 14 years, it also shows that he is a man who values love, but what he values is not his love for his wife or his daughter. Fang Xinyu slowly walked up to him and said, "Brother Tangning, please stop beating Daddy. Daddy is also feeling very bitter." Tangning stroked her hair and said, "Don't worry, I won't fight with him again." On the first day he joined the Hanlin Academy, something like this happened. It was not what Tangning wanted. He felt that he must have accumulated a lot of resentment and anger in his heart during the battle of wits and courage with the Tang family in recent days, which would make people change. If you are violent, you need to vent it out as soon as possible. He decided to go to Tang Yaoyao to practice. Either beat her up or be beaten up by her. No matter which outcome it was, he could express the depression in his heart. When he climbed over the wall and jumped into Tang Yaoyao's yard, Xiu'er was the only one in the yard. Tang Ning patted the dust on her hands and asked, "Where is your young lady?" Xiu'er had become accustomed to his sudden appearance and said, "Miss, she went out to discuss business." Tang Ning knew that Tang Yaoyao was busy these days. She wanted to take back the business that should belong to them from the rich man Tang, and also expand their business in the capital. She has lofty ambitions, and is bound to surpass her father's property and become the first richest woman in the Chen kingdom. Tang Ning had always supported her decision. As long as she received a certain amount of dividends every month, she could do whatever she wanted with the rest of the money. The two Tang dynasties combined would be invincible in the world. Sooner or later, rich man Tang's property would be in her hands. It would be a matter of time before her money surpassed rich man Tang. "Can't you just listen to Dad for once? Let you take care of the Tang family's business. Isn't it better than just messing around on your own?" "I'm not fooling around. Dad, don't forget, I've already earned 1,000,000 taels of silver." "Is that what you earned?" "It was what you gambled on." "Oh Dad, don't worry about it anyway, I have my own plans." Hearing the conversation between Tang Yaoyao and rich master Tang coming from outside the courtyard, and getting closer and closer, it was too late to climb back over the wall, so Tang Ning took 3 steps at a time and dodged into the house. Tang Yaoyao stepped into the yard and walked straight into the room. Rich man Tang followed him in, sat at the table, poured a cup of herbal tea, calmed down for a while, and then said, "Dad doesn't want you to do anything big, as long as you are happy just be at peace. If you want to do this, just do it. If you encounter any problems, remember to tell me." Rich man Tang finished his tea and left with a sigh. Tang Ning came out of the closet and said, "Your father actually loves you very much." Tang Yaoyao was startled, stood up and asked, "Why are you hiding in the cabinet?" Tang Ning explained, "Your father doesn't like me very much, so I had to find a place to hide." Tang Yaoyao glanced at him and said, "I'm not in the mood to play cards today." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I'm not here to play cards with you. Why are you looking for me if you're not playing cards? Hit me." A quarter of an hour later, Tang Ning was lying on the grass in the backyard. After exercising with Tang Yaoyao, although her whole body ached, she felt very relaxed and comfortable. When you feel depressed, it really helps to find a way to vent. Even if you don't take advantage of the whole process, the depression in your heart will be swept away. Tang Yaoyao flexed her wrist and said, "My mood is indeed much better. Otherwise, if you are unhappy in the future, you will come to me and beat you up, so that both of us will be happy." "No need," Tang Ning said quickly. It's not like he was a jerk, he wouldn't feel comfortable without being humiliated by her. Unfortunately, everyone he knew was better than him, and none of them were evenly matched. If they had come and gone, fighting for 300 rounds would definitely be more enjoyable. He put his hands behind his head and breathed a sigh of relief. "My first experience at the Hanlin Academy was not pleasant. I wonder what it will be like in the future?" Even after leaving her boss, she still had to go to work. Early the next morning, Tang Ning arrived at the Hanlin Academy on time. No one arranged work for him, and no one mentioned what happened yesterday. He wrote a few volumes in the check-in room, ate a not-so-delicious work meal at noon, and soon stayed up until the day off. The Hanlin Academy was still some distance away from the palace entrance. The working meal at noon today was very unaccustomed to him, who was used to Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi's cooking. The imperial chef in the palace had a completely different attitude towards the royal family and officials. He decided to have it tomorrow. Bring meals from home. Boom. Tang Ning lowered his head and was thinking about something, when a figure unexpectedly bumped into him from the side. He staggered, and the figure fell directly to the ground. Tang Ning looked down and found that the girl who bumped into him was the girl he had seen yesterday. The girl was holding a string hub in her hand, apparently flying a kite. She probably didn't pay attention just now, and Tang Ning didn't intend to argue with him. You are so brave," the girl held the thread hub and just said something. When she raised her head, she was suddenly startled, then her face immediately turned pale, she dropped the thread hub and ran away screaming. "Your Highness, run slowly." The eunuch and maid behind him hurriedly chased after him. Tang Ning glanced at the direction of her escape, shook her head and said, "It's inexplicable." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 261. Apart from the inexplicable girl she met, Tang Ning's second day at the Hanlin Academy was extra WW law. The Hanlin bachelor or the attendant bachelor did not mention what happened yesterday, and everyone seemed to have selectively forgotten about it. Actually, during the morning court today, several censors impeached you, but Mr. Fang stood up and spoke for you, saying that it was just a misunderstanding, and His Majesty had no intention of pursuing it, so the matter was dropped. Xiaoju was on duty in the Golden Palace, so he was naturally more informed than him. He comforted him, "You were too impulsive yesterday. Do you know how many people in the capital are waiting for you to make mistakes, especially the Tang family? They have suffered such a big loss at your hands, and there are probably countless pairs of eyes staring at you from top to bottom. Once they get a hold of you, even His Majesty will not be able to protect you." "Nu." Tang Ning nodded. He was not truly fearless, and he would not be so stupid as to expose others for nothing. Although the Tang family's power in the court has been weakened, no one in the capital is still able to do so. An underestimated behemoth. Xiaoju remembered something and said, "In the future in the Hanlin Academy, you just need to be careful about Fang Zhe." Tang Jing was transferred out of the Hanlin Academy today and went to be the director of the Ministry of Household Affairs. It should be concubine Tang Hui who did it behind the scenes. If you go to the Ministry of Finance, he will no longer be able to control you. The head of the household department, like the Hanlin attendant, is an official of the 6th rank, but being transferred from outside the Hanlin Academy shows that officially entering the court is a normal personnel transfer. No matter if Tang Jing was transferred out, if he saw him in the Hanlin Academy all day long, he would feel panicked. Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning, his expression suddenly changed, and he asked, "By the way, have you offended Princess Ping Yang?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I don't know Princess Ping Yang." Xiaoju said, "That's the girl who was there when you beat Fang Zhe yesterday." Tang Ning finally remembered that the girl who was so aggressive with him yesterday and bumped into him today was actually a princess. Counting yesterday, they had only met twice. Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I have never provoked her. Speaking of provoking, maybe I saw Fang Xiaoyu being bullied yesterday. I was angry and spoke to her in a harsh tone. She accidentally bumped into her today. If this can be considered provoking, then this princess typing is also too petty." "That's right. You have only entered the palace a few times, so there should be nothing to offend her." Xiaoju thought for a while and then said, "Princess Ping Yang is the only adult princess in the palace who has not yet opened a palace. She is very popular with His Majesty. She is usually very close to concubine Tang Hui, and your relationship with the Tang family is, anyway, you should be careful about her. She is a little girl. Tang Ning doesn't take the initiative to provoke her, so she doesn't have to be afraid of her. Judging from her age, she is about the same age as Jing Er, about 16 or 17 years old. The other princesses of the Chen kingdom were already married when they were 16 or 17 years old, which means that you won't be able to live in the palace for long, so what else do you have to worry about? When Tang Ning came to the Hanlin Academy again, she didn't see Princess Ping Yang. She greeted Gu Bai Kui Lang and returned to her room. No one arranged work for him, so he had to kill time by writing books. It is better to write here than to be forced to write by Tang Yao Yao. At present, their business is still mainly selling books and peripherals, and the source of these is Tang Ning. He always feels that he has become Tang Yao Yao's money-making tool. He picked up his pen and wrote leisurely. In another part of the Hanlin Academy, there was someone with a head as big as a bucket. One person looked at a middle-aged official and asked, "Master Bachelor, what kind of work do you think we can arrange for him?" The middle-aged official thought for a while and sighed, "Our Hanlin Academy has another great person coming this time. This job is really difficult to arrange." The Hanlin Academy was originally an aristocratic yamen, a place that countless literati dreamed of entering, but the actual power was not great. He was a Hanlin bachelor and his official position was only 5th grade. As for the officials of the Hanlin Academy, some of them will not stay in the Hanlin Academy for a long time. This is just their temporary residence. After a year or two, when they become familiar with the various regulations of the imperial court, they will soar into the sky and even surpass them. The Hanlin bachelor was far behind. There is no doubt that the top 3 people in the imperial examination every year are all such Qianlong. Chen Guo's second top-rank scholar in history, not to mention, must be an upstart who is highly valued by His Majesty. The Hanlin bachelor thought for a moment and said, "Let him read some regulatory books and become familiar with the rules of the court for the time being. Your Majesty should have other arrangements for him." The official nodded and asked, "What about him and Mr. Fang?" Academician Hanlin waved his hand and said, "Even the Fang family has not pursued this matter, so we will not get involved. We will just wait and see for the time being." The official nodded, but sighed secretly in his heart. Mr. Xiaofang had been in the Hanlin Academy for more than 10 years. Regardless of specific affairs, he had to light the clock and leave the office on time every day. However, he spent most of the time in the office sleeping and did not care about anything. I wonder where he got so much sleepiness. And this new Mr. Tang is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Since the establishment of the Hanlin Academy, there has never been a person who beat 2 shangguan in a row and can still have a meal the next day. After Tang Ning finished writing 1 volume and just started the 2nd volume, someone brought a box in and said, "Master Tang, Master Bachelor asked us to bring this over. Please take a look at these when you have time." "Put it down." Tang Ning nodded, walked over, opened the box, and saw that it was full of thick books. It would take a normal person to read them all. I don't know how long it would take. Reading didn't take long for him. He randomly picked out a book, sat at the table, and started flipping through it quickly. After flipping through dozens of pages, I found that the 2 people who came in carrying the box had not left yet. They were looking at me dumbfounded. They raised their heads and asked, "Is there anything else you can do?" "No, no," the 2 looked at each other and quickly left. When they retreated to the courtyard, one of them sighed and said, "This master of editing really has a profound background, but he is so perfunctory with the bachelor. Is that reading a book? He is clearly flipping through a book." Another person said, "It's natural. If he doesn't have a deep background and beats Mr. Fang, how can there be nothing wrong at all? Although Mr. Fang does look like he deserves a beating, only the one who really dares to do it can. He is alone." The other person glanced at the door, his expression suddenly changed, and he winked at him desperately. "What's wrong with your eyes?" the man asked doubtfully, and then said, "Do you think Mr. Fang will take revenge on him? If I was beaten so badly, I would definitely not let it go." The person opposite him looked forward, bowed and said, "Master Fang." The man who spoke just now was startled. He turned around and looked at the figure walking in from the outside. His body trembled and he broke into a cold sweat. "Fang, Fang, Lord Fang." Fang Zhe had a white cloth wrapped around his forehead and there was a bruise under one eye. He didn't look at them and walked straight past them. In a duty room in the innermost room of the Hanlin Academy, Su Shikong heard the footsteps outside the door, raised his head and took a look, then immediately stood up and said, "Master Fang, are you okay?" Fang Zhe waved his hand expressionlessly, sat back in his seat, opened a book habitually, and looked at it. Su Shikong looked at him, sighed, and said no more. If he didn't sleep in the middle of the day, he would probably stare at the contents of this page until he goes to office. The box of books that the two men brought in were thick and boring. After flipping through one book, Tang Ning felt a little dizzy. He closed the book and before finishing his cup of tea, the gong sounded. He cleared the table, walked out of the check-in room, and walked slowly towards the palace entrance. After walking out of the palace gate, he didn't go far when he saw a figure walking dangling in front of him. Tang Ning looked at that figure and felt an unknown fire in her heart. She took 2 steps forward and said in a deep voice, "Stop."